By the early 1990s, Apple were at their lowest point for years, with millions spent on failed concepts and unpopular machines. They were barely keeping up with their rivals IBM. But with some clever business deals and the return of former CEO Steve Jobs, things were looking up. Except they weren't. With the end of the 90s came the largest recession in Apple's history. In 2 years, we lost $1.8 billion. Although they made a profit in 1998, it was barely enough to rectify what they had lost. With the new millennia came the biggest revolution in the history of digital media, and to everyone's surprise, it had an Apple on the back. For years, Apple were a leader of the pack when it came to technology, the Apple II being the high point for years before the Apple III would go on to ruin their otherwise spotless reputation. The machine bombed and Apple put the majority of their workforce into fixing the damage. While most of them did this, a small portion would begin work on revolutionising the way we use computers. This concept would take the shape in the form of Lisa. The machine bombed commercially, and its steep $10,000 price tag and limited production meant low sales, but the machine is renowned as not only the spiritual predecessor to the Macintosh, but the beginning of modern computing as we know it. From its introduction in the mid-1980s, the Mac had slowly been gaining popularity. Apple introduced many successful computers during the 90s, for the majority of the decade. Apple sold well, but for some reason they weren't turning over a massive profit. But in 1997, Apple lost over $1 billion and their revenue dropped by a third. That's bad. The next year they barely made $300 million. And that wasn't enough to fix the damage. They needed something good. It was during the late 90s that the portable music market was entering its stride. The turn of the century would bring with it the MP3 market, bringing the imminent doom to the CD and minidisc. The market was dominated by expensive media players and cheap imitations, but one thing was unanimous: they weren't user-friendly. In 2001, Jonathan Ive would give Apple his take on the MP3 player, and unlike its competition, it was simple to use. The iPod was a revelation. It had done away with the clunkiness similar devices had at the time, and had a lot of space for music. With the following years, a new iPod would be released every year, with new features to boot. With 2003 came a click wheel, a complete redesign of the original iPod's interface, and it turns out people loved it. The third gen defined the iPod as a must-have, and every year would not only outsell its competition, but would outsell the previous iPod too. Ive's original concept has spawned over 22 models of iPod, and a phone range, and a tablet PC. With each new product, Ives has taken a simple idea and gone on to make life a whole lot easier. With the iPod fastly becoming the biggest media products in history, Apple in 2003 introduced iTunes. By signing the 3 biggest music labels, they had access to millions of albums and were allowed to publish every last one of them to their online store. Through their 35-year history, Apple has gone from a small business venture between friends to becoming one of the biggest companies on the planet. They set out to revolutionise everyday items and make them a whole lot easier to use. And although they made their fair share of mistakes, nobody can doubt that it was worth it in the end.